So have you ever wondered what the results are of landing gear up? So stick with us on Flywire. We're going to take a look at that today. Hey, I'm Scott Perdue, and today on Flywire we're going to take a look at what the results are of landing gear up in a retractable like this Bonanza. We're actually going to look at a Bonanza. Now, caveat here is that, knock on wood, I've never landed gear up. I have a congenital fear of doing that. I have a really good imagination, so I think I can figure out what it's going to be like, and it's an experience I really don't want to have. But having said that, I think that it's important to accept that when you fly a retract, it's possible that that's going to happen to you. Is it an engine failure? Is it a gear failure of some kind? Something like that, you're in a situation where you might have to land gear up and you just have to accept that. I think that's something that you have to go into it having accepted it beforehand instead of worrying about it when it happens. So it's something you decide here on the ground instead of up in the air under stress. So today we're actually going to look at what the results are of landing gear up. Okay, is it a total disaster? Is the airplane a total wreck? And so on. Yeah, and you know, if you've seen my videos that talk about accidents last year, especially forced landings, that's an engine out, off airport landing. Last year, every single forced landing that landed off airport with gear down had at least one fatality on board, sometimes more. And the ones that landed gear up off airport didn't have any fatalities. They did have injuries. I'm not saying that it's not a dangerous thing, but generally it's a much safer course of action because, you know, we have little bitty tires on this airplane, on most GA airplanes like this, unless you're flying backcountry stuff with the great big balloon tires. So there's a lot of weight packed into a very small contact patch, and the unevenness of the ground, etc. There's all kinds of bad things that can happen, and the airplane's going to end up on its back, or you slow down really fast, and you know, our bodies are not really designed to take an awful lot of deceleration or acceleration. So you want to minimize that. Landing gear up is probably the best thing to do. And for a forced landing on a runway, if I had an engine out, and I do have a runway or a road or something like that, it's a prepared surface that I think I can land on. Well, my intention is to land gear up, okay? That doesn't mean that's what's going to happen, because if I mismanage my energy to where I put the gear down and now I'm not going to make that prepared surface, you know, that's a bad thing. So on the good bad scale, I don't want to do the bad thing. I want to do the good thing. So for me, as I make that approach, the gear stays in the well until I have earned the gear, if you will. If you can think of it that way, is I'm successfully going to be able to make the field. I've got time to put the gear down. I'm going to do it. Otherwise, I'm going to land gear up. So that's a decision I've made here on the ground, and then I train for that kind of thing when I go and practice these kind of maneuvers in the air. So today I wanted to give you a real quick walk around on what it looks like for in particular, Bonanza. Here's the prop, and I'll admit to you right now that this airplane has never landed gear up, which is a good thing, but it's always a possibility. These are the prop blades. These are what they're supposed to look like, okay? So there's been some confusion with the Q-tip prop, which actually has a kind of a square tip design, and the prop kind of curls right here at the end. And when those first came out, a lot of people thought that there'd been those things that had a ground contact. Didn't turn out to be the case. But the first thing you're going to see is the spinning prop. If it's spinning, is the prop tip is going to curl. Okay, and the more curl it is, probably the faster the RPM that's happening. Okay, does that mean you should shut the engine down before you touch down? Well, if you've got a two blade and you got plenty of time, and I'm thinking generally in these kind of situations you don't have plenty of time, but if you got plenty of time, you can do that and then maybe bump the prop so it's parallel to the ground. But if you got a three blade, the odds are, yeah, you're going to touch the ground. So the engine you can count out the engine and the prop. So don't worry about that. That's something that you can get all wrapped around the axle and get all screwed up for. All right, so then we're going to take a look down here. These are the areas. Now the gear is down, but so you don't really see it, but these gear doors will be shut. So what happens is the gear doors take the most of the impact. The cowl flaps, if they're down, and you're going to squish or collapse the exhaust. That's the vent tube there. And if you have any antennas on the bottom of the airplane, count those out too. But with the gear up, you can see as the wing has its incidence, you're probably not going to touch that either side. And if the gear door is hanging maybe or something like that, inner gear door is hanging down, then it's possible that's going to get drug. But with the flaps are down, which are here in the back of the wing, and a lot of gear up landings happen with the flaps down, and it may not be a bad thing because the damage is minimal. You can see in the back there the step right here. The step actually sticks down pretty far. It's pretty strong, so that minimizes the impact of a gear up landing. But with the flaps down on either side, here and over here, you're going to get minimal damage. It's going to be to the flap, but not to the rest of the airplane. And the step is going to take a lot of heat. The full flap, is going to drag a little bit on that side, and on this side, quite a bit. So we'll show you what some of that damage looks like. But other than that, generally, especially if you have the flaps down, you don't have a problem. If you don't have the flaps down, that step will still give you a lot of separation. But now the wing on this side is going to be leaning down, and that's when you're going to drag the gear door, maybe both gear doors, pitot tube maybe, and the rest of the wing. And if you've got a wing, tip tank, it's going to do that too. Plane, and we're going to take a quick look at another thing that kind of mitigates the damage from a gear up landing in a Bonanza, and because the design is actually pretty robust for that. So let's take a look at it. All right, so where we're going to see on the flap, if the flap was down, it's going to be the inner portion of this flap here that holds it. But look at the way the fuselage angles up here into the empennage. Right about here, we got a break, and then a pretty severe angle up on the empennage. So that ends up being a pretty significant design criteria that mitigates the damage from a gear up. Okay. That doesn't mean that, again, I am not advocating that you go out there and try that or do this, because I'm just not. But if you have to do it because of a mechanical failure, gear failure, or an engine failure or something like that, what I'm saying is that you don't really damage the airplane that bad. You don't have to worry about it. Don't have to have that in your brain for this is something that I have to worry about for the airplane. Okay, so there's just that. So that's taking a look at the airplane, some of the design features of the airplane that actually mitigate the damage from a gear up landing. It's just not something that you should have in your bag there hassling with, because as I've said before, the airplane's big job, if you have a failure of some sort, and it could be yours where you forgot to put the gear down, but its job now is to put you on the ground in one piece. That's the most important thing. And normally, fortunately for Bonanzas at least, if you have a gear up landing, and especially if you have the flaps down, the damage is not that bad. I mean, you're going to have to redo the engine, you're going to have to get a new prop. Sure, you're going to have to get a new exhaust, most of it. Sure, but that's all pretty cheap and easy to fix. You're going to have to do sheet metal work, new doors, new flaps, reskin the flaps for something like that. But it's not the end of the world, and it's not the end of that airplane, okay? So don't worry about damaging the airplane. Worry about getting yourself on the ground in one piece, okay? Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that ameliorates your anxieties of a gear up landing. If you have to do it, you have to do it. If you want it, you don't want to do it. And if you listen to some of my videos, especially when I'm doing a landing, I check like 5 times because I have a really good imagination, and I don't want to hear that scraping sound. It's happened to lots of friends of mine that are better pilots than I am, so I work at it pretty hard, and I just suggest you do too. But I'm not worried about it if I have to do it. I've already made the decision that in certain circumstances, I've done that on the ground here, certain circumstances, I'm going to land gear up because that's the safest course of action. And then I'll worry about fixing the airplane. Shouldn't be too bad. So hope you enjoyed watching the video, enjoyed making it, and hopefully you learned something. And if you did, hit subscribe. It's right over here. Those really help me. If you like it, hit a like button. That's great. If you don't like it, don't like it. Also, if you want to get notifications of the next video, hit the bell. And if you want to support the channel on Patreon, here's all my pitch, all these calls to action stuff that everybody says, is right down below is a link to the Patreon page. So I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time on Flywire.